Hey everybody, it's the first of the month, so you know what that means. It's time for the next episode of Thirds on First.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Thursday. Welcome to Thirds on First. We're so excited to bring to you the first episode of our second season and also the first episode of 2021. We have made it. Yay. The crowd goes wild. And so this is also February, which of course we want to give a shout out to Black History Month, which we will be highlighting on our social media sites. But today's episode is actually going to talk about relationships, which is something that we often associate with February as well because of Valentine's Day and the like. But we're not just going to focus on romantic relationships. We're going to focus on all types of relationships and lessons that we have learned over our lives, which might be of use to you as well. And so we hope this will be a very interesting dialogue, and we're going to just go ahead and jump in. So ladies, I will pose our first question to you, which is really, how did you learn about healthy relationships? Was it something that you saw modeled? Did someone sit you down and discuss these are what healthy relationships look like? Or did you find out some other way?
Hmm. So I think, I've always instinctively am like, oh, like my parents have been married for a long time. They'll have their 50th anniversary this year. But and even though they've always had like a very healthy relationship, I didn't see the the ebbs and flows, right? Like that wasn't visible to us. What was visible was like mom and dad, always there, grew up in the house with them. But the parts like I can literally only remember one time in my life my mother being annoyed with my father. And like it was something that as a mom now I better understand, but like he was supposed to take me to go pick out glasses and he didn't, and like she was pissed. And I just remember her like driving in the car mumbling under her breath, right, to take me to go pick out glasses. But I don't remember anything else. I don't remember any like tensions, confrontations, anything like that. And so I never saw a model of like how do you go through the seasons of marriage, that kind of thing. I honestly think it's been as an adult and doing having my own experiences and also having conversations like with you guys and with other friends and kind of researching on my own in therapy what a healthy relationship is, can be, should be, and that reflection thing. Nobody ever sat me down though. It was like, this is what it is and this is what it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate you saying that because I had assumed your answer would be, oh, it was my parents. And I just tried to model my relationships after my parents. But it's interesting. That was an unexpected response because your response is actually closer to my own, because I looked at that question and thought, well, it certainly wasn't my parents or any other relationship that I saw growing up. And it probably wasn't same as you until I got well into adulthood, and probably the first real marriage that I saw that I would even want to try to emulate wasn't until I met my in-laws now. And so that was, well into my 30s. But it's interesting you say you didn't see your parents go through the ebbs and flows, because one of the surprises I think that um, my husband found in our marriage is that he was expecting his marriage was going to look exactly like his parents, and I think his parents did a very good job of just I don't think they tried to hide anything, but a certain generation, you kind of, some things are behind closed doors and you don't share everything with your children. And I think it surprised him that we had to kind of create our own script and figure out what worked for us. And that it took some adjusting to realize that our marriage was not going to look like theirs, but then to also move towards a place where we could say, no, it doesn't look like that, but there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think you guys made me think of something, and it's something a guest pastor mentioned at church, and it was the importance of being able to have healthy discussions and arguments in front of your children so that they learn how to do that, so that they, one, don't get the false perception that, arguments never happen, or two, when they realize something is going on, because kids are very perceptive, we know this, and they're like, okay, but like, well, how did you do that, right? Like, so on the one hand, you don't want to be yelling and screaming,
Right.
in front of them, but at the same time, you want to show them how to have a healthy, argument, and how to be able to voice their concerns, and not just in a marital relationship, but in all relationships, because I think this is something we've talked about before. I think a lot of times we associate, relationship with just what I will call body-based relationships or romantic relationships, where there is something, physically intimate going on. But really, relationships are everyone who you are coming in contact with, at least on some type of, substantive level. So your friendships, your family members, and I think we need to be mindful about how we show up there. And for me, like, and I think this is probably true for most people, like, no one sat down and was like, this is what, this is how you should show up in relationships. Like, there was a lot of focus on being a good person, being a good citizen, being the best you can, with focus on the individual. And, these are the things you should do, but not so much on how to interact with others. And so there was a lot of looking around and picking and choosing what I thought would work for me and what I didn't. But I would say, like, in my early 20s, I found myself reading all of these self-help books and like relationship books that really sort of informed what I wanted to create for a relationship, because I could sort of see a disconnect between some of the relationships that were immediately around me and what was on like TV, like what media depicts. And so I was like, okay, well, there's a disconnect. Like, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but how do I get there? Because knowing what you want and knowing how to get it are often two different things. So I felt like I leaned very heavily on, folks like Iyanla Vanzant and T.D. Jakes, and even, like Joel Osteen, like books, just to kind of open my mind to different tools and tips.
And I think, like, as I think about parenting, I had a situation last month that I ended up having to explain to my daughter. And long story made very short, there was an encounter where the person was being very disrespectful. And I was like, we're getting off the phone. And she didn't really, I could tell she was confused by what was going on. And, I kind of let everything kind of come down before we had a conversation about it. But the conversation that I had with her was in my mind also setting a foundation that I wanted her to hear my words later when she was older, and it would resonate more, right? And the conversation was, we got off the phone because that person was being very disrespectful to your mother. And even though they were talking to you, they were being rude, and we don't allow rude people to stay in our space. We don't have to do that. We don't tolerate that. And so those are our boundaries. And when they can't respect that, then we don't remain in that space. Mm-hmm. And she understood it, right, for that point, because she told everybody else, I had to get the phone because they were being rude to mommy. But and I was like, you need to advertise that. But I also, like, I want her to echo that in her head when she's 12 and 13 and 16 and 30. And that's something that I find our peer group does more of. And I think a lot of it is because we didn't get that. And that's not a knock on our parents, right? It's a generational thing. And I think when you know better, you do better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I think our children are being exposed to a lot more just by the era in which they are coming of age with social media and TV, and everything is bigger, faster, better, more all the time. And so I think that if you're parenting in this day and age, you can be having conversations with your children about how to interact with others, and how you should treat other people, or somebody will. And I love what you said 3/3 earlier about modeling how to have an argument and that sort of thing, and also letting your children know that relationships are not perfect, because kind of touching on all these little points, like if you just watch movies, or get your ideas about what relationships look like from the media, you're going to have this storybook version of what a healthy relationship looks like, and you think it's one that is always loving and always happy and conflict free, and as we know, that's not reality. And so I think it is important for our children to watch us resolve conflict, and then to know too that conflict doesn't mean you're not safe. Conflict doesn't mean there's a problem with the relationship. It is natural to have conflict and to have those ebbs and flows. And it is a vital and important tool for grown-ups and children alike to learn how to repair, which is a term that comes from the Gottman Institute, and we'll talk about John Gottman a little later. But that just kind of goes to, we all lose our temper, and we all get upset, and we all say things that we wish we wouldn't. But how do you come back and repair? And I'm sure 1/3 you can relate to the scenario of, sometimes you even have to apologize to your children. You say something in the heat of battle, because sometimes parenting is a battle, and you have to come back and you have to apologize. And I think that's a very important thing to teach children, that, when you hurt someone, you come back, you apologize, you repair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say one of the tips that I learned as an adult actually came from a post on social media that was out of a children's book. And it was a mother whose daughter came to her, and she had a crush on a little boy in class. It was her first crush. And they'd been reading a book, and she asked her daughter to go to the page that was on love. And so what the book had done was take 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, which is, love is patient, love is kind. And she asked her daughter to insert the little boy's name and all of those different qualities of love. And, the daughter thought, and she was like, well, he wasn't too kind when he pushed so-and-so on the playground yesterday. And he wasn't patient when he did this. And, after she went through all the qualities, she was like, maybe I don't, maybe he's not as loving as I thought he was. And one of the things I have done is try to put my own name in those verses and see how I am showing up in my various relationships. And it's a good way for me to do a temperature check. But it's also a good way to put other folks' names, in that place as well, and see, like, is this relationship as balanced as I think it should be? Like, has this friendship outgrown its course? Is this acquaintanceship something that is actually blossoming into a friendship? For me, it is just a good tool to kind of gauge, how is everyone showing up? And is this balanced? Is this truly loving?
I love that.
And I think that kind of brings us to something we want to talk about, which is what are the practical tools that you have learned over the years that have helped you in navigating your various relationships and that have enhanced the quality of your relationships? Mm-hmm. Who wants to kick us off?
Well, I will start with one of the tools being the 5 love languages and taking that assessment, because I think as much as we can have the do unto others as you would have them do unto you, like, everyone really wants to be done unto as they want to, right? So if I, love words of affirmation and quality time, but if the person I'm interacting with loves gifts, like, it's going to always be a miss, right? Like, we are speaking, we're trying to say the same thing, but in two different languages. And so I think it's important to have that own self-awareness about, how do I expect this other person to show up so that you can communicate that, but also to be willing to hear them out and recognize, okay, I might have to do something that's a little bit out of my comfort zone in order to, adequately express my love to you. Because if I'm, loving you in my language, but it's not also yours, then it's just wasted effort. It's never going to be truly communicated.
And I think along those lines, like for me, I am learning this, right? I feel like this is like in the past couple of years, I'm really starting to absorb this of sometimes understanding other people's love language comes from the quality time that you spend with them and just the observations. Like I'm always, I'm in these different groups and people will be like, so what's your love language? And I'm like, that's how we lead this conversation? No, but I can observe, and I use my daughter as an example all the time because I think it's easier, right? But like if I'm on a call, and I try to strategically plan out my day and my work day around her school schedule, but if I'm on a call and she's not engaged in something else, that she has like school or something, she thinks I'm her playmate. And so, she will make this comment of, you're always in a meeting. Well, it's not true, right? Absolutes are never true. I just made another absolute, but they're typically not true. But what I have learned from that is that she needs the quality time. Mm-hmm. And that's what feeds her soul. And so I have to then figure out how to make that happen. And I think so often we operate in giving to others what is actually our own love language, mm-hmm. instead of understanding how to meet them where they are, even if that is completely foreign to you and feels really weird. Like that is the selflessness of any relationship where you're giving of yourself to meet other people where they are, that you are vested in. So no matter what type of relationship it is, like, are you vested in that person and growing that relationship? Then you've got to find those things that matter to them, and hopefully they are doing the same for you.
Right.
That's been a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. I've also learned that for me, I have the love language that I want to receive. I am words of affirmation and physical touch. So that is how I perceive love. But that's actually not the love language that I use to show love. Mm. I am acts of service when I show love. So I'm always kind of working myself into a lather, right? When it's like I'm planning a party or planning a birthday or trying to get the house looking great or whatever, it's the doing that I tend to use to show love. And so I think that because it's funny, I'm not always good with words of affirmation, ironically, even though that's what I perceive as love when I hear it. And so I think that's an interesting observation too. And just for folks to think about that, like, maybe you want to receive it in one language, but you tend to give it in another. And then trying to figure out what does your partner or whoever you are in relationship with, maybe they have that same dynamic too. And another a tool that I thought I would bring up was one that we got in some therapy that we did, and it is a powerful tool, and it's called mirroring. And I only learned this about a year ago, but if you really use it, it has the power to just completely transform for the better your interactions, not just in a romantic setting, but really in any relationship that you have, because I've used it with my kids, I've used it at work, I've used it with clients, and it is truly powerful. And so what mirroring is is it is a tool and a method to really demonstrate to the other person that you're in conversation with that you hear them and you empathize with them. And I think at the end of the day, just for, a quick footnote there, I think all of this conversation is truly about connection, right? And really about, when we talk about love and giving love and wanting to receive love in all of its forms, what we're really talking about is that human connection. And I think that is just vital to our ability to thrive as people, is how connected are we to others. And so mirroring is when you're having conflict with another person and they bring to you something that feels like a complaint to you. It really bugged me when you didn't clean up the kitchen. Often our default in those scenarios is to say, yeah, well, you didn't pick up your underwear off the floor, or, well, okay, I didn't clean the kitchen, but let me tell you the 85 other things I did, right? Human knee-jerk reaction is not to take ownership of the criticism. It is especially me being a lawyer, it's like, well, let me find all this other evidence to prove to you why what you're pointing out is irrelevant or, is diminished because you're not thinking about these other things. What mirroring does, it says, you basically mirror back to the person and you say, okay, I heard you say that it bothered you when I didn't clean up the kitchen. Can you explain to me why that bothered you? And it's really just continuing to dig deeper with the person into what's going on with them from an emotional standpoint with respect to the issue they've brought to you. And then you say, okay, so I heard you say it bothered you when I didn't clean the kitchen because you felt like that I was not being a good teammate. And then you say, did I get that right? Did I get that right? And then they say, yes, but there's also this other piece, right? And you go back and forth like that. And then you say, you finally ultimately get to the end and you say, okay, is there more? Is there something more that I should know? And what I would encourage folks to do is take yourself out of the whole thing. This is really not about you. You don't have to defend yourself. Take yourself out of the situation and go in deep with the person on where they are. Mm-hmm. And once you get to the point where they say, nope, that's it, you've got a grasp on what I was trying to communicate, then you say, well, I can see how you would feel like that. I could see putting myself in your shoes, I could see how you would feel that way. And I apologize for that. And I will remember in the future that when I don't clean the kitchen, it makes you feel really rejected and hurt, right? Because that's at the source of most of these things. People, to me, the expression of anger is really just an expression of hurt. Mm-hmm. It hurt me. Mm-hmm. And I have found that, again, to be a powerful tool to use, even in the simplest of situations. You've got somebody at work who's like, you should have talked to me before you sent such and such and did such and such. Oh, well, can you explain that to me more? And it is disarming, because when you own your shit, it allows other people to own theirs. And it actually closes the gap between you and others and leads to more connection, mm-hmm. as opposed to driving a wedge. Because when your instinct is to deflect or defend, and John Gottman talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, when you criticize the other person, it pushes you further apart.
That's good. I actually, I was in a Clubhouse session this week, and they did this exercise where they asked questions. But the first one she asked was like, what brought you here? And she asked the same question 5 times. And what you just said reminded me of that, right? Like my first answer was like the person that referred me to this room. My next answer was like a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And instinctively, like when you hear the concept, it's like, don't keep asking me the same question. Like I've already answered you. But if you just take a moment to pause and say, let me just walk down this path, right? Let me just kind of see where this goes. That's where you actually get to the depth and to the heart of it, which is what you just described. Because when you first talked about it, I was like, I get it, but I wonder if I would be annoyed by that question. And then I had to take a minute and go, or like, if I just, what happens when you just roll with it? And I think sometimes we forget to do that. And it kind of like, that was my tool thing was it's taught me. When I was married, our therapist said, let go of the expectations, because most of the source of frustration and conflict are unmet and uncommunicated expectations. And we have the stories in our head, whether it's from what we saw growing up or what we see on TV or movies or read in books. And we expect that of other people, but other people don't live in our heads. Mm-hmm. And so if you just learn to be in the moment and not in your heads, like I have created all kinds of scenarios in my head. My whole week, I was looking at my meetings for this week, and I was like, I've already got scenarios in my head of how they're gonna go. And even with that, I have to be like, okay, I'll let you do this little exercise, and then you need to stop and just show up and be present. Right. And I think we forget to do that.
Yes, we do. And coming in neutral. Come in neutral, right? Assume good intent. That's another one. Assume good intent, particularly of your partner. Now, if somebody's an ass, they're an ass, right? But like, don't, like, to your point, don't have the script in your head that you did this thing because you're an ass. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe you did that thing because you're absent-minded and you didn't realize that it was a trigger for me. Well, let me explain that to you.
Well, my therapist's favorite line to me is, what is the story you're telling in your head? Mm. And then I always have to mirror back. The story I'm saying, that the story that's playing in my head is da da da. And then she's like, and who told you that story? Oh.
And women, we're the queen of the always and never. That's what you always do this. You never do that. I mean, we have a flair for the dramatic, right? Like this is owning your shit. You sometimes have to say, okay, do they really always leave their underwear on the floor? Okay, maybe not always.
Maybe like 90% of the time.
Well, and we can make ourselves martyrs too, as women, Black women. We've talked about this before. We strap it all on our backs, right? And that's great. It makes us resilient and we get so much done, but we can sometimes feel very put upon, and we have to take ownership of ourselves. And in fact, that kind of leads me to something you brought up in our prep session to 3/3, which was about your relationship with yourself. Did you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, I will get to that. I do want to say, to the point of being a martyr in relationships, regardless of the reasons, I think we should not confuse that with giving, right? Because giving and sacrificially giving in that way force you to show up in two very different postures, right? Like when you feel like you're giving and you're giving from overflow, like you're excited, right? You're a cheerful giver. Like you are happy to do it. When you're giving and it feels like a huge sacrifice, right? It's out of frustration, right? And so even if you are in the right place, like if you're doing for a good reason, ultimately, right? It's like, how does that look to the other person, right? Like if you're like, well, I did this for you and blah, blah, blah. Like, who wants that? I'm like, you could keep it. I don't need it.
I might be getting convicted.
But like, I don't.
Right there. That's good.
But yeah, I mean, I think it is like, get to a place, give what you feel like you can cheerfully give. Like if, you know, like if it's not, I can't give you 100 today, but I could give you 50 and I could be happy about giving you 50. Like I'd rather have 50 than 0.
Right.
And I'd rather have 50 than a begrudging 100.
Right.
That is what a quandary. And maybe not one for today, but my goodness. Yeah. I mean, when you're like a working mother and it's like, I got partners and clients and children and husband, and now I got I got a dog too. It's like
37 things going on around here.
sometimes even the bare minimum, you feel like, gosh, dog, can I just get 5 minutes though?
Just breathe.
But that's true though. And that this is something I struggle with and need to work on, which is like, I am the person who's responsible for my life and my happiness and my peace of mind and taking care of myself. And so I can't be mad at everybody else because I'm overworked and overtired. Well, you didn't take care of you. It's not somebody else's job.
Right.
Well, and that ties back into the whole notion of you are your life partner. You are the only person who you are going to be with from start to finish the entire time. Like you are always with you. Like you can get on your own nerves, right? But you should also endeavor to really love yourself. And I think we often like throw around like self-love and self-care, and we throw it around and he's like, oh, you know, take a nap, take 15 minutes, you know, go get a massage. All of those things are a part of it, but it's really deeper than that. It is really, truly loving yourself. And I think if you don't love yourself, I have this theory that I think we often expect others to love the parts of us that we think are unlovable, right? Like, you know, you're looking for someone to come along and fill that space. And it's like, but why would you think that would work, right? And even if it did happen, even if you found someone who would come and, you know, and matched up perfectly with those holes and, you know, poured in their love there, would you even trust it? If you can't love those parts of yourself, like, does it even feel genuine? Like, would you look at them and be like, well, what's wrong with you? Right. Like, yes, this is what I said I wanted, but I don't know, you know, I'm suspicious.
What you would be like, yeah, I hear you, but did you notice this little piece about that's wrong, or this little piece? Like it's when people give you a genuine compliment and you don't know how to say thank you.
Right. Because there's something about you that rejects you, like you're putting up a wall for it. And I think it is important for each of us to truly take time to love ourselves, to grow, to work on ourselves, to show up in our relationship as whole and as happy as we possibly can. Like, because like you said, 2/3, like it's no one else's responsibility, right? Like, sure, like we want to be in partnership. Like it's a beautiful thing when you have two givers who are together, like everyone is watering everyone else, and you know, something beautiful can blossom from that. But if you're not also willing to show up whole, if you're showing up and you're expecting someone else to not only take care of themselves, but also to take care of you in a way you're not willing to, like, you know, there's always going to be a miss. Like expectations are always, you know, and yes, I'm saying absolutes. Like they're not going to happen because like, fundamentally you're not, you know, showing up. I'm sure most of us have seen the meme of the little girl who's trying to like buckle her car seat and her dad's trying to help. And she's like, worry about yourself, right? And I will stop myself and be like, no, you need to worry about yourself in this situation, right? Because if you worry about yourself, if you handle what you need to handle, if you stop trying to fix other people and you work on fixing yourself, right? Like, and not that any of us are really, we need to be fixed, but we need to be as whole as we possibly can, healthy as we can be, you know, then you show up in your relationships in a very different way. And I think it takes a lot of the pressure off of the other people who you're in relationship with.
Yeah, because it can, the people who are in relationship with you, if you are, let's level set and say we're all broken, right? In some way, we're all jacked up in some way, right? But if you show up really just only with your needs and only with your well needing to be filled in it, and you're solely dependent upon that well being filled externally, well, dang, that's a lot of work for whoever's in relationship with you. And I mean, that is a heavy burden to put on someone else to fill you up.
Right.
Right.
I challenge the notion of the broken model a little bit, because I think it's on a premise that we have to be perfect, right? And I think it's those things that we might be willing to call flaws, right, that really are what make us unique and what make us beautiful. You know, they are opportunities, right? Like, so yes, you can always strive to get to a higher level, but like, if because something happened to you and you're not the way you were, 5 years ago, like, did you really break? Like, are you not still a whole, like there can certainly be work to be done. There's certainly things that we're all striving for, but sometimes I think broken draws up this connotation that doesn't necessarily serve us.
Well, I'll say I'm broken. And really what I mean is we don't get out of this thing without experiencing trauma. None of us gets out of life without experiencing trauma, and trauma puts prints on you. And even modes of communication, habitual, or your habits of communication and habits of mind, those every past experience influences a future experience. And so, you're never going to be a blank slate.
Right. But I guess I'm saying, like, do you have to be a blank slate? Like, if I have $1 and I crumple it up, it's still $1, mm-hmm. right? Like, and sure, it's not as pristine as it was when it just came off the press. But if you need $1 and I give you the crumpled up one, are you going to say, no, it doesn't have value because it's crumpled?
No, I don't. And I don't think that's what I'm saying. I think what I'm saying is even the most perfect of life experiences, everybody's on a journey.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that everybody's going to bring it might be a little change purse, or it might be a giant shipping trunk, but you're going to bring a little bit of baggage and something with you. It may be just a small broken heart or maybe a big broken heart. For me, everybody now who's been watching this podcast knows, the trauma that I experienced in childhood. And I still bring that with me. And that's something I continue to work through. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not somebody else's job to repair the mm-hmm. trauma that I've experienced in my life. I mean, that's on me. And mm-hmm. so I agree with you from the standpoint that, like, we're all imperfectly perfect. Right. Mm-hmm. Those things that have happened to us, I think, influence how we relate to others.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we're on the same page. I think it's a little bit for me. I'm trying to be very mindful about the words I use and the connotations that they put.
That's fair.
And so I think that's where we get a little.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I did.
What?
Let's see. Well, are there any other tools that we've really learned from?
Sorry.
I said it's not a tool, but it is a lesson that I think has been important. And I think it's a good segue to kind of what you guys were talking about. I'll share the context of where I got it from in a second, but like this idea of traveling our own life paths mm-hmm. and not looking to others to drive the expectations or what that means. And so I think I shared this with you guys before. Like, I was reading this book, and in the intro, the author was talking about his wife, and he was like, we've been married for 18 years. Our marriage is an adult. And I was like, that's a really interesting concept. By the way, this book had nothing to do with marriage. I don't even remember what the book was about. It was like a self-help book, but I don't remember what it was about. But I thought about it, And I was like, this is really interesting. So I typically think about it in the context of marriage, where like I said, my parents have been married 50 years this year, and they can be in the same room and have a whole conversation and have only actually verbally said maybe 2 words each. And it is mind blowing to me. But that comes from 50 years of work, right? Like they've been together longer than they didn't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens typically is people, fall in love, do all the warm, fuzzy things. Maybe they get married and they expect their marriage at birth to look like the really grown marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, part of growing is all the stages, right? And raising a child, they always say the days are long and the years are short, and it's so true. And so at birth, you can't do anything by yourself, and you need all of this attention and all of this nurturing. And as you get a little older, you need a little less, but you need it in a different way. And so your needs change and adjust, and in a ideal environment, you adjust accordingly, and you do that all the way through. And that's how relationships are. You have to nurture them, you have to grow them, and you have to change and adjust to their needs over time. And when you don't do that, then what happens is somebody's adjusting and somebody's not, or they're adjusting in different ways. And this is how you get the fracturing of a relationship. And so whether it's, my oldest friend, we're 43, I've known her for 41 years. That is not going to look like, the relationship that I have with somebody that I just met. Mm-hmm. I can talk to her once a year, maybe. Mm-hmm. We text, but like actual have a conversation, it might be once or twice a year, but we pick up where we left off because that relationship was nourished over the years, that it makes it easy to pick up where you left off. Mm-hmm. But if we walk into life in any relationship being like, this is going to be just like this other one, it'll never happen, because you have to grow where you are, and you have to put in the time and the effort in any kind of relationship. And I think remembering that is really, really important for nourishing, and recognizing that all things aren't to be nourished. I'm a firm believer in that. Remember that story that goes around every few years on social media, reason, season, lifetime? Like there are people that come into your life for a reason, for a season, and for a lifetime. And I believe that to be true. And sometimes those reasons and seasons are a day, a week, a month, a few months, a couple of years. And yes, it's okay when they end to be sad or hurt or whatever you feel, because you should feel whatever emotions. But then we have to recognize the place that it had in our lives, the imprint that it left on our lives. And what do we do with that? And keep going.
And I think that can go for your blood family and your chosen family. Just because someone's your blood family, no one gets a free pass to pick up residence in your life if they are a person who is incompatible with your peace.
Yes.
Yes. Right. I also kind of want to riff on that a little bit and say too that there's a certain maturity that you need to evolve into in developing adult relationships. And again, I think it just goes to, your relationships can mature, but you can mature as well. And one of the things that I've learned about marriage, and I've had 2 long-term relationships in my life. One was 10 years long, and the one I'm in now is at 14 years. And so I think that makes me a serial monogamist. But in any event, what I have learned is relationships, romantic relationships have a lot to do and their success have a lot to do with the changing of perspective from what am I getting to what am I giving, how am I growing, what am I learning from this life experience. And it's with my husband Chris, I think we've done a little bit of, we've been together long enough where we've done a little pivot from looking into each other's eyes to starting to really look out onto the world and moving together through life as real partners, right? Because in the beginning, we were talking in the prep call about this word limerence, and limerence is that all-consuming, drunken love that at the beginning you just cannot get enough of the person, and you want to wear them, and you want to eat them, and you want to smell them and breathe them and just inhabit them, and it's wonderful and exciting. But I just want everybody to know that's not really love. It's more of like kind of a crazy obsession, and it lasts long enough. There's like biology to it. It lasts long enough for you to kind of conceive a child and get them through like the first 12 months of life. So after that, right, that's when you really shift into love and journey and growth and learning. And again, if you want to take like a biblical stance on it, really kind of learning to love another person the way that God loves us. And look, we're never going to get there, right? But the notion is, how do I love you when you feel unlovable to me? Mm-hmm. How do I do that? Where does my patience come from? And how do I grow? And how does that make me a better person, not just to be in a relationship with you, but to be out in the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the most profound things that I think I've heard on that front was so simplistic and just simplistically elegant, right? It's that unconditional love is loving without condition, right? And it's like, yeah, we all get it, but when you really pause and like let that sink in, and it actually was on like a Super Soul Sunday, and the speaker was saying like, yes, like my wife and I have been together for, 50 years. And I have this long list of, things that I love about her. And he's like, and then I had to stop. And it's like, because if I love you because of all of the wonderful things on this list, then I'm really putting conditions on my love. And I think, this is really where we get to the difference between like and love, right? Like I really like all the things you have on this list, but I love you even if that list goes away, because love is a choice, right? Like you choose, like love is an action word, right? Like you choose, it's not just a feeling. And I think, like that is really what we are called to do. Like we are called to love everyone, right? Like not just those people who we like, right? And and like if we show up in a very loving way for everyone, like this world will look like a very different place than what it looks like right now. I mean, because I think right now it's easy to have something that frustrates you interrupt that flow of love, right? So like, oh, I stubbed my toe, well now I'm angry and now I don't want to be loving to the next person who I see because, this has disrupted me. But you can choose to just be like, okay, I get hurt. I take a second. I go back to being loving. So.
Because you're the enemy is the enemy. Your fellow man is not the enemy.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's so brilliant. The notion of like, we get agitated, something doesn't go our way, we stub our toe or we spill coffee on ourselves on the ride to work, whatever. And in whoever we turn to next, like they get it, right? Like that person is not your enemy. And the more we can remember that and remember exactly what you said, which is like, we are called to love everyone. And my love, the love I receive and the love I give, that can't be earned.
Right.
That's not a currency that can be earned. When you love that way and you receive love that way, you know, you understand that your value and the value of others is intrinsic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not about deeds, it is about humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And acknowledging our own humanity. And I think our country needs to realize that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going through a very painful time in this country. I mean, and hopefully brighter days are ahead, but we have, you know, we're so polarized that we have, you know, our neighbor is now, they've been othered from us. And you've heard it said many times before, you know, there's far more that unites us than divides us, but I think we've forgotten that along the way.
Right.
So that applies in a macro sense, but in a micro sense too. You know, the people who are in your life who love you, your partners, your friends, you know, they in their heart of hearts, it's like, again, assuming good intent, they want the best for you, right? And so it's when you can adopt that perspective and not think everybody's out to get you, all the better.
No.
Choose love every day.
Choose.
Right. I think on a micro level, you said something that's really important too. Like, I think when you are in conflict in a relationship too, like also realizing the other like it should be the two of you attacking the issue and not attacking each other. Right. And so I think, you know, what you were talking about with the mirroring, I think that definitely is a very practical tool to get to that empathy, and also to have the active listening. Right, because I think that's one of the highest forms of respect you can give someone, and a beautiful way to demonstrate love is to actually give someone enough time and attention to really listen to them, and not, you know, be in your phone or be thinking about what you're going to say to them next, even, right? Just to really be engaged and to listen.
Listen to, so many people listen to respond. They do not listen to hear. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. I mean, that's what you're taught to do in law school.
Fair response.
But it's disarming, yes. And again, bringing it all back to connectivity, it's disarming when folks, I think because we so seldomly really listen to each other, when you really listen to someone, it's a gift. It is a gift. And when you don't presume you know what it's really about. Oh, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You don't know how I feel. But I love it if you can say, you know, I could see how you might feel that way. Or that makes sense to me. And taking the time to really hear a person. Gosh, what an act of love.
I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to feel heard and seen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And the way that comes is from other people listening. So if we all take a moment to really listen and to allow someone to be heard, and in that mirroring exercise that you've shared, it actually shows between that and what we talked about earlier on giving people what they need through their love languages, right? That's what allows people to be seen. That's what makes people feel seen. And when you feel heard and you feel seen, you do feel the love. It doesn't have to be a romantic thing. It's love between people. That is how we choose love.
Yeah. I love it. Well, this has been
always good.
Always good. Hope that everyone out there enjoys this episode and get you some love this month.
Yes.
Give love, receive love. And it's not hokey. It's that's what we need, is some love in this world. So be blessed. We love everybody. And
love you guys.
Bye.